Well, first of all, just to for those who don't know us, especially those on the Reddick side of the family, my name is JT, and this is my wife, Lady Cee. It's a pet name. I've called her all of our married life, so that's where she got that from, if anybody wants to know. Basically, we were, like many people, we were born, pretty much raised in this religion from about the age of 5. So this is pretty much all we know. We grew up and we did literally the entire Jehovah's Witness career thing. We became young publishers at a young age. We got baptized. We both regular pioneered, auxiliary pioneered. I served at Bethel for a number of years. I was an elder in the congregation, gave talks all over the area. Was on the convention programs, circuit assemblies, what we call now the regional conventions. Work with different organizational aspects. Work with things from Bethel. Work with the society's legal department and helping with issues that involve Jehovah's all around the world, from Eritrea out of Africa to Russia. So I've had an opportunity in both of us, in terms of the people we've been exposed to over the years, to see an aspect of the organization that unfortunately a lot of people never get to see. And as a result, you get to see and hear a lot of things. And I'll be very honest with you, as you begin to deal with those who are, as it were, higher up in the organization, you get to see a little bit different aspect than when you're dealing with Sister Old or Brother Young. You begin to notice that things become more corporate. Policies, directives, guidelines, SOPs, those things become pretty much the bread of the organization at those levels. And so a lot of things such as the fruit of God's Spirit, well, that's kind of secondary at that level many times. Brothers become what is known as society men. And that's a phrase that you will often hear as you deal with brothers in the organization. He's a good society man. He's a good society man. And basically what that means is this is an individual who follows directions. He doesn't think for himself. He don't ask any questions. He simply does what he is told. And as we know over the years, those are the people who rise in the organization, those who don't ask any questions. And it becomes very difficult as the years go by, because you have to literally close your eyes to a lot of things that you see, a lot of things that you hear. And so we just wanted to give people an opportunity just to touch base with us, ask questions. If we know the answer, we can give it to you. If we don't, we'll table it and we'll get back with you if we can. So
that's right. Because last night I said, when we did our test, I said, no, we're not rocket scientists now. Yeah, so we don't know the answers to everything. But I mean, I think what I feel about this whole situation, and my, being a Jehovah's Witness and waking up and finding out that this is not the truth, I feel like it's a good thing knowing that I'm not alone.
Yes.
And I feel like, as humans, we're all looking for something. We all believe in something, and we're really just out here trying to figure out where to go. Yeah. In fact, here's one question. It's kind of loaded, so I don't know how you want to, answer this.
Go ahead. I mean, JT. If I know the answer, I do.
But there's a person here that's asking a question on the Reddit side, and they said, how can we undo indoctrination besides researching JW's Bible, science, cults, psychology, and critical thinking? That's pretty loaded.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because that's really, we often tell people, you basically have to do the same thing that you did coming in. In order to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you had to take the time to study their doctrines. Well, interestingly, that's how most of us end up getting out. We actually took the time to go back and study them again. So that's really what you have to do. Part of it we find is that you have to be willing to, as we say, let the chips fall where they may. You have to be willing to call a spade a spade. And many of you know for a fact that you have talked to family members, relatives, or just other witnesses who they're right up front. Yeah, I know that's wrong, but that's okay. And so that is where the problem starts. Lady Cee and I, we have what we refer to as it won't pass the Bible study test. And basically what that is a test that any Jehovah's Witness can perform. And that is, you're sitting on a Bible study with the circuit overseer, and you just shown something to your Bible study. And that person says, well, that's true, but I'm still staying where I'm at. You wouldn't accept that as an answer. And there's not one Jehovah's Witness that would. And yet it's interesting how when you turn the tables and put us on the couch and someone points out something to us that's wrong, we start making excuses. Well, they're imperfect. Can you imagine every Bible study said, well, Pastor Leroy Johnson, he imperfect too. We wouldn't accept that. Yet we will flip the tables and we will come up with every excuse we can. Well, that's part of unwinding that indoctrination. You no longer have to simply accept something that makes absolutely no sense. And that's what it really stands in. That's what really happens. So part of the backing out process is pretty much like you came in. And that's why people will send us all kinds of magazines or articles to read. And that's where it starts, when you start reading some of these articles that people will share with you and you start thinking critically about it. That's really the whole thing. We were never allowed to stop and think about it and just ask the question, does this make any sense to you? And it's kind of interesting how the society sets this thing up. You can't discuss it.
True.
You can't discuss it. If you could imagine a group of witnesses, let's say you had 3 couples who went out to dinner after the article on the change of the generation teaching. Can you imagine what would have happened if they could have actually had an open discussion? Y'all think of that change, man. I mean, we've been teaching this for decades. Can you imagine if they could have an open and honest discussion on changes of doctrines? Mm-hmm. Witnesses can't. Everybody at the table knows they're supposed to fall in line and say, well, this is what we're going with now. Yet we would never accept that from a Bible study. Never at all. So we have to kind of like unwind pretty much the same process we came back in. What you got there?
And it's not easy. Okay, now this question is for JT. This person has wanted to ask this for years. You sound like a circuit overseer I had some years back. Did you grow up in the LA area or spend significant time there? Were you trained by any brothers out there? Because it is amazing how much you remind me of him. So I don't know who her circuit overseer was, but no, JT was not a circuit overseer.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No, never circuit overseer. The training is interesting. I had a chance to visit Los Angeles, and when we visited, we had a very, very prominent brother who was well known in the music industry. He was one of the individuals who introduced the speakers. But actually, I was trained by a person at Bethel. He was a former circuit and district overseer. He works in what is called the Society's Service Department, which for years basically oversees elders, circuit overseers, pioneers. They handle all judicial cases. And it's kind of funny how it kind of turned out in terms of speaking and so forth. Mm-hmm. I'm originally from down south, North Carolina, country boy, okay? Well, at Bethel, you get a chance, when I was there, you would have the opportunity to become a reader. And those are the guys or girls who read on the tapes and who read for the assembly programs and the dramas and so forth. So you could audition. And so if you were a ministerial servant, you could actually apply to audition. Now, remember the day we went there, long line of all these guys that you know, and you would be invited into various brothers' offices, and they would have you read over something. You can read anything you want from any magazine, yearbook, whatever it was. And as a result, you would either be passed or you would fail. So as you're standing in this long line, you're seeing the guys who are coming out, and it kind of reminds you of American Idol when they come out jumping up and down like, I passed. And then you would see the guys who would come out, and they would come out with their head down like that. You know they fail. Well, so I went in, and brother sat behind the desk. And he says, okay, brother JT, I need you to read whatever you want to read. So I'm thinking, because they used to tell us at Bethel all the time, they used to tell us, y'all guys represent the cream of the crop. Y'all represent the cream of the crop. From whatever congregation, whatever circuit you're from, you guys are the cream of the crop. Now you're here with all the cream, so now you're nobody. So I'm sitting there, right? So I started reading. I guess I read maybe like 3, maybe 4 sentences. And he said to me, he says, stop, please. And I'm like, okay. He says, brother JT, are you from down south? I said, yes, sir. He said, I thought so. He said, you have what we call a lazy tongue. And society don't want brothers reading on the magazine with that lazy tongue like you got. So he flunked me. He didn't pass me. So now I got to go out of his office and walk down the hall past all your buddies, and they just laughing at you. You didn't make it easy. So I'm like, man, I thought I could read halfway decent anyway. So about 2 days later, I get a phone call. The guy's hollering, JT, telephone. So I go over to the phone, and he says, this is brother so-and-so. I say, how you doing? He says, just want to get back with you and wanted to know, would you like to improve in your reading and your speaking skills? I said, sure. He said, I tell you what, this Monday, after the Watchtower study, I want you to meet me in one of the conference rooms over in the Towers building. And sure enough, after the Watchtower, the family Watchtower on Monday night, the Bethel family has a family Watchtower study. I met him in the room, and he had a tape. I remember he had a legal pad. He had one of those little old cassette tapes. They had little buttons you press, play, rewind, and he had a couple of magazines. He said, I want you to read. We're going to record you into the recorder. Then we're going to play it back and let you hear how you sound. And so I said, okay, that's cool. And so that's what we did. And we would do that almost every Monday night after the Watchtower. It turned out that he had a lot of other brothers that he had taken under his wing, and he was helping them to become better speakers and better teachers. And so, long story short, this man helped me to put public talks together. He helped me put together what is basically like a portfolio of how to answer the brothers and sisters' questions. So that's where I got my training from. And it's very unfortunate that in the organizations, what I tell you all the time, the organization has a lot of good people. In fact, every one of you sitting out there listening to this, you know that, Sister O, Brother Young, Sister Smith, that you were in your congregation, good people. But the problem is what we were being taught. And so the organization can help people, but unfortunately, it has taken literally all of these good people, put them together, and too many times has given them a message or information that has absolutely nothing to do with the Bible. It's simply the opinion or the thoughts of the Watchtower writer. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of training that I personally, and that's why I tell people, he would tell me things that were things that you would not have in a regular conversation with an average brother. And because of the way he worked that, he would just give examples. Well, this is the type of thing that we will run into sometime here at the headquarters and this and that. And you'd be sitting like, oh man, I didn't realize folks doing that kind of stuff. So that's basically how it started for me.
Okay. All I'm doing is just going through all of these comments.
Next question.
All right, y'all. You guys can put some questions out here on this feed if you want to as well. All right, what else we gonna say? What else y'all want to know?
All right, go right ahead.
Oh, somebody has a question. Which of you woke up first, JT or Lady Cee? Okay, let me answer this a little bit in my words. Because after we got married and we went to our new congregation, and I think we were driving into the parking lot for the next meeting. And I said to myself, I told JT, I said,
second meeting.
I said, I don't want to go here. I didn't. I was like, I don't want to go here. Something didn't seem right. But it took 10 years for us to kind of like wake up. So the way it happened was because we always talked to each other about the crazy stuff in the congregation, and we never really said, oh, you can't say that because you're going to be speaking against Jehovah. We never had those conversations. We kept everything real.
Oh, yeah, keep it real.
We talked about everything from A to Z. JT would talk about all the crazy stuff that happened in elders meetings. I talked about the stuff in the Kingdom Hall, just everything that was just crazy. So that when we finally got our first computer and we both would go up on the internet, well, I was up there talking about the women's issues. And I was like, oh, wow, there's some other ladies up here, sisters in the congregation, talking about their Kingdom Hall and their congregation and the crazy stuff that was going on. And I would go back and tell JT. Now, he was supposed to tell me, you better get off the internet. You better stop reading that stuff on there because I'm going to take you to the brothers. That never happened. But we just had this open line of communication, and we just kind of like talk back and forth, Yeah. And so I think it was like one day, JT, so I'm just telling you, I'm just kind of showing you how we just had these conversations. And the conversations that JT and I had were conversations that the Watchtower Society doesn't want couples to have.
Anyone,
because, anyone. But I'm just saying, but in your relationship, your husband, your wife is the closest person to you. And if you can talk about things to your spouse, you've broke down a lot of Watchtower dogma just in that conversation and in your relationship with your spouse. So I'm going to say we were more loyal to each other than we were to the organization.
Oh, yeah, that's why we left together.
And that's how we really got out together, is because of the kind of relationship we had. Yeah. So JT is going to tell you about what he was doing on the internet, because he really is the one that got the information before I did. And before, you know, because of the way we always had our conversations, I was on board day one. I was going wherever he was going is where I was going. Because remember, like that 10 years prior to that, I didn't want to go to the Kingdom Hall anyway, because I thought something was weird about the congregation. And unbeknownst to me, it just wasn't the truth. So now JT's going to finish up and tell you what he found and discovered on the internet.
Yeah. When we first went on the internet during this time, it was interesting in terms of who was on the internet. This is very important. This is absolutely important as to who was on the internet. When I went on the internet, there were elders, circuit overseers, and Bethelites on the internet. And the type of conversations that we would have, they're nothing like what you often see on the internet today. Most of the internet conversations, if you go to most forums on the internet, all you see folks going back and forth, just, you know, fussing and fighting, all that kind of crazy stuff, right? Not this right here. These were elders. There were brothers who were still elders. There were men who had left. And I know I also participated in many of these conversations where we would actually be discussing judicial matters, how the society says to handle this. And so people who were not elders, sisters who had never been able to read body of elders letters were reading bodies of elders letters. Publishers who had never seen body of elders letters were reading them because they were being posted and uploaded. So people literally got a chance to peek inside of what takes place in these judicial meetings, what takes place with conversations that involve elders. And so you would have circuit overseers who would chime in. And so this is the type of individuals in the organization who were participating on the internet. And the society realized we got to shut that down. And so basically they issued a blanket order. If you are up on the internet as an elder, you will lose your stripes. And so all of a sudden, the internet just vanished in terms of elders, ministerial servants, pioneers, Bethelites, circuit. Those guys were gone. We even had a couple of district overseers. These guys would chime in because people, they knew that nobody could find out who they were. So I'm going to go ahead and talk on what I got to say. And so all of a sudden, all of these individuals who actually had access to information, letters, and documents, they were gone. So unfortunately, what did that leave us with? Well, that left us with Jehovah's Witnesses who many times at the Kingdom Hall are viewed as spiritually weak. Even among the congregation, that we know he ain't doing too good. That's Brother Johnson over there. And so now here was their opportunity to defend the organization. I mean, so you'll see all these people on the internet who they have no responsibility in the congregation, but they are up on the internet. So the type of people who are now left are people who many times have no experience in things such as this. We're going to do some videos about the judicial issues and how women are treated in judicial cases. It's just unreal. I mean, it's unreal. And you can listen and read people's experience, but we're going to talk about that with some of the videos we're going to put together that deals with how these men who are elders, who are many times have no qualification many times, will delve into questions that are so intimate and so personal. If you were to tell a coworker this, they would not believe it. They simply would not believe it. So, you know, it's kind of interesting how it plays out.
And the thing is, so when you were on the chat forum, that was Jehovah's Witness.net or H2O?
H2, it was called H2O. It was one of the first chat online was called H2O.
Okay, so then you got into a discussion with somebody.
A lot of discussion. In particular point?
When how you got the crisis of conscience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, crisis of conscience. Oh, my goodness.
Because the question was, how did you
someone, I had people who would make the statement, and I remember so well. One guy said, JT, I'd rather be wrong with the society than right with you. And it was at that point, I realized this is sad. Because as a witness, we always champion that we love truth, you know. But the reality was we didn't love truth. We liked the Watchtower truth. If the Watchtower said it was true this week, we loved it. If they said something else was true next week that changed from the previous week, we loved that too. So this is the type of environment that we grew up in, very much involved in a lot of organizational things over the years.
So anyway, so what ended up happening was JT had gotten into this, it was a, back and forth with this brother where he had left the organization, and JT was trying to defend the Watchtower. So then what he did was he challenged him, and he said, well, if you know all this stuff that you're talking about, then for him to go get this book. And that's when JT went and ordered Crisis of Conscience. Yeah. So at that point, he realized that this wasn't the truth because he knew a lot of the people in the book. And that's the reason why we got out, was because of that book. Yeah. But I mean, you know, when you look at all of the things that we have on the internet today, we didn't have that years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't there.
Yeah, so we didn't have the support system that we have today.
Oh no, the system is in place now to help people, because the most important thing that the society wants a Jehovah's Witness who leaves the organization to feel is they want you to feel alone, by yourself. I'm out here all by myself. And I tell Lady Cee, and we've had this discussion with other former Jehovah's Witnesses over the years, I have high respect. I mean, I give great respect to the witnesses who left in 76, because witnesses who left in 76, there was no internet. And we've talked to so many of them, and they're like, we were by ourselves. And so today we have forums that we can bounce stuff off, talk to people, and get the support. And so our encouragement to people who are watching, take advantage of the various forms, not just critical things, but take advantage of these forms, contact these people, and you will find that you can now start. My mom says, so you need to start building a new clientele of friends. What you got?
Okay, so I got some other questions that's coming up here. So it says, one of the questions is, what are your thoughts on the Watchtower's inability to apologize for major doctrinal errors aside from legal implications? It appears to me there is a serious disconnect at Bethel. Your thoughts?
Excellent question and excellent answer that you gave. The society changes certain things because of legal reasons. Just gonna run a couple of them by you. Just in the year 2000, the legal department made the recommendation, get all the governing body off the corporation, get them off, get them guys off. And so one of the governing body in one of their videos made a post about, I don't report to the Watchtower. Watchtower won't tell me what to do. And he is legally correct because he is not on the Watchtower corporations. He's not on the board. That was a decision made by the legal department. The change in blood transfusions. For years, if a witness took a blood transfusion, they could be brought up on disfellowshipping charges. Notice what I said now, disfellowshipping charges. The society has changed that. It has migrated from disfellowshipping over to disassociating. And we did a video that dealt with that, and you'll find it deals with how basically you have what's called action, which requires a disfellowshipping, and passive action, which is what a disassociating is. And so these are legal steps. The reason probably why the society, and they have a long history of this, because it works. I mean, it works. When people start doing something and it works, why change it? The Watchtower knows that they have an audience of listeners who, if we change something, like the old saying, some of you may have heard it, Circle C or Disco C was talking about, if this book is red and society says blue, what color is it? Oh, it's blue. That's because society knows who they are. They know who their followers are. Their followers do not require that the society apologize. Let me give you a simple example. In the Catholic Church, when the issue of pedophilia broke out, do you know who took the lead in that issue being addressed? It were Catholics. The Catholics like, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We want to know the whole story, get everything out, get these children some help, let these people who are adults and been living with this stuff for 20, 30 years, get them some help and restitution. That was led by Catholics. When the Watchtower came out with pedophilia issues, not one Jehovah's Witness for the most part said a word. Not one, for the most part, that's not, well, that's just the way it is. Wait till the new system, little girl, she'll be taken care of. She'll get her mind together in the new system. Right now, we need to just go ahead and move these books be moving. And so this is the type of environment. So the society knows we have a listing. The guys down in writing, they have to be laughing sometime at the witness. Like, if we write that, you think they're going to buy it? Yeah, they'll buy it. They buy anything we say. And that's what they know. The track record of the Watchtower writers is the vast, vast majority of their members will accept whatever they say, because that's the way the organization is structured. That's why we call our site critical thinkers. The average witness is not allowed to think critically. Every one of you who are watching this video, you know a Jehovah's Witness who was sitting at the Kingdom Hall when they came up with that overlapping generation teaching, and they said, this is crazy. But they just remained silent.
And you know what? Like when I was coming along, and you know, we were in the 70s, and I remember how before 1975 they didn't have as many witnesses. So you got to remember that, you know, as the organization begins to grow, they have to take more responsibility for more people. So when you start coming out trying to apologize, if you got like 25 people in your organization, you could probably, you know, put all the apologies you want to out there. But when you start talking about millions of people, then you're going to have something to do. So you're going to have to jump through hoops to make it seem like we didn't say this and stuff like that. So, you know, that's one of the biggest things is they know. They know. Like you said, there's going to be lawsuits. They know. There were lawsuits. I mean, look at what, just give you just a simple example. It's a real simple example. All of my life, we were told that elders are appointed by the governing body. The governing body appoints these. That's what we were always led the society upon. Just recently, they just like, we're not going to be responsible for that. We're going to push it down to the lower managers, known as circuit overseers. So if the circuit overseer appoints a man who has problems down the road, we can claim, well, we didn't know anything about it. He did it. You know, Larry down there in Tennessee appointed him. We had nothing to do with that. We had nothing to do with that. And so you can see how the society is making these moves to protect themselves, not the friends. Right. Now, somebody on our channel, they said, what happened to the district overseers? Oh, oh man. Oh, my goodness. We have to, I'm going to tell you, the society can be cold. I mean, they can really be cold. Two examples. I have people I have known for 20-some plus years. These guys were at Bethel, 20-some plus years, them and their wives. Society fired these guys. I know someone who worked in drafting in the engineering department. And one of the first things that they noticed when they got the blueprints to Warwick was they noticed how few rooms they were putting together up at Warwick. And it was like, wait a minute, we got X number of rooms down in Brooklyn, and we're only going to have X number of rooms up in Warwick. Somebody's not going to Warwick with us. And sure enough, one of the guys from the Bethel office, George, he gave a speech to the Bethel family. I cannot imagine how George must have felt when he got the assignment from the Bethel office. We want you to give the speech about how we're going to downsize. And go ahead and put it together, George. You'll do a good job, George. When I was watching George give the speech, you could see it was like, I can't believe they sent me out here to give this speech to the Bethel family about we're going to fire all these people. But George, that was his assignment. And like a good society man, George marched forward out there in front of the Bethel family and told folks, change is good sometimes. Change is good sometimes. And so we know people who had like 25, 30 years at Bethel, they sent them home. The question about the district overseer, same thing. When you consider a district overseer has been typically years in the circuit work. Now he's in the district work. And the society basically told him to put it as simple as you possibly can. They said basically turn the car keys in and move out of the apartment and go get a job. And so we personally know district overseers who were pushing like 65, 70 years old. These guys had been on the road since they was 32 years old. And now the society says, go get a job. It's very interesting that, and I tell Kathleen and Lady Cee and the others, how these people represent the most loyal people in the organization. As we sit here right now, we can rattle off over 100 couples, who have not had any children because they're waiting to have their children in the new system. So us, yeah, including us. We don't have any kids either. We're waiting for our kids later on. Yeah, we got kids in the new system. So these people are some of the most loyal people to the organization. And it's interesting when you compare them to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church takes care of its old nuns, takes care of its old priests. They have a little retirement community. The society has nothing. They have absolutely nothing for circuit overseers and district overseers and retiring mission. They have nothing for these people. It's almost like the Eskimo put them on the ice, push them out into the ocean. And that's what makes it so sad. The society takes this most loyal members, and when you're done with you, they throw you. I mean, take your typical Kingdom Hall. All of us watching this video, everyone you watch it, you know Sister Johnson pioneered for 35 years. Now she's homebound. How many witnesses stopped by to see Sister Johnson?
Yeah, they'll stop by when they work in the territory to get some water, use the bathroom. But how many witnesses stop by to see Sister John? Yes, she was a faithful pioneer when she was young. Now that she's older, can't be in the valley, they push her out on the ice. So the organization basically will take people in, use them up, chew them up, and spit them out. Now, does that not remind you of a corporation if you've ever seen one? Absolutely.
I'm trying to get some of these questions. So I got my head over here trying to copy and paste. Now, somebody put a question out here that says, what do you think about the publisher ID requirement? Have you heard of that?
Yeah. That is that's interesting. As everybody basically knows, the big thing now is known as PII. Okay, personal identifier information. That is huge. We're in the IT industry, and that is absolutely huge. And that is protecting people's identity and their information. And it's interesting how the society is doing this, because in many countries around the world, you have to understand the society has boots on the ground in over 200 lands all around the world. And in each of these countries, they have different law requirements, different things that they want people to do and can't do. So when you're running a multinational corporation like the society is doing, it has to be a nightmare, because they have different laws that they have to apply in each country and then try to present them as this is Bible based. And when witnesses look at one country to another, and especially when you have the internet, where witnesses in one country can talk to another country, we don't do it over here. Well, the brothers told us the society, this is Jehovah's arrangement. Well, what happened over there? Well, that wasn't Jehovah's arrangement over there. So this is the kind of ridiculous stuff that the society is in right now. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this works out, because people are literally having to submit some very personal stuff. And I mean, it's simply amazing. As we often tell people, the organization of today is not the organization that we were a part of when we were kids. And it's understandable, because this is a corporation. This is a company. We move books for the organization. That's what we did.
Didn't somebody I think somebody emailed me something telling me that they got to fill out some paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
And you were saying something about this is a way for people not to be able to fade.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. This is going to be interesting because, it's going to be very interesting because
if they don't fill out the paperwork, then they're going to be looked at.
Oh, yeah. Well, exactly. And we know how the organization works.
Yeah.
The organization creates its own definition of words. Let me give you an example. Take the word volunteer. Well, everybody on your job and in your neighborhood knows what a volunteer is. A volunteer is a person who can do something if he wants to, and if he doesn't have to do it, he doesn't have to. And there's no feedback. There's no blowback to whether he does it or not. Well, the organization basically told the society, told the elders basically, you can't make the friends fill these forms out. Can't make them fill them out, but we want to know who they are. And so all of a sudden, you now go into the bad boy list. And so this is just another example of how high control groups keep track of his people. And it's funny because a lot of people are seeing this. And when they see this, people are reaching the breaking point. We're like, you know what? They're going a little too far now. And that's what we often see, is they reach the point where people like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Right.
So, it's interesting.
It is. Okay, let me get some more things here. King of Faders. Hey, he wants to know, why did they release the old watchtowers online? I love it.
Oh my goodness. King of Faders. We have a friend. He's called the King of Faders. He's the master in fading out the organization.
And be sure to check out his
be sure to check out King of Faders.
Check out his YouTube
channel. Oh my goodness. Check it out.
He is awesome. He's awesome.
What he does, and we encourage anyone who has up a forum or YouTube channel, there's no reason whatsoever to make up stuff about Jehovah's Witnesses. Please, I cannot stress this enough. There's no reason to make up anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. The reason why is because all you have to do is use their own published material. I tell people all the time, the society's published material is their worst enemy. So the question that King of Faders is asking is that the society for a number of years, when they went to the internet, the magazines and everything was locked at 20 years. So you really couldn't go back further than 20 years. And now they're making these older publications available. Now, this is interesting because many Jehovah's Witnesses, when you approach them and you show them something from like a 82 watchtower, an 83, or even older, they'll say, what? That's old light. That's old information. There's no value. Now, it's kind of ironic that as Jehovah's Witnesses, they use a book called the Bible that's thousands of years old. Yet if you show them a magazine that's 15, 20 years old, it's like the date of milk. It has spoiled now. Who ever heard of teachings of God spoiling? But as Jehovah's Witnesses, that's a concept that we came up with. So it's interesting that the society now has online older publications, and you will be able to take these publications, and now with them adding them online, you can let any Jehovah's Witness know. Well, if the society feels that they're of value, that's why they put them on the internet. So now, if they have value, we want to use them. As I said, there's no reason to make up anything on the society. There's no reason to make up anything on Jehovah's Witnesses. Right. Use their own publication. That's how we all got out. We just took their publications, laid them beside each other, and compared them, and we begin to see the discrepancies, and the discrepancies reveal to all of us, this is definitely not God. One of the phrases that we use is that basically they have taken human opinion and they have elevated it to divine status. And that's really what we live by. Nothing more than human opinion many times.
Now remember, okay, years ago, they had the Watchtower on CD.
Yes.
And we have that. We still have it. But do you remember how many went back? How many it went back to? How many years it went back?
It went back to 50.
Okay.
The Watchtower went back to the 50s. I think the weight went back to like the 70s.
Okay. So that means that they didn't want us to see all the crazy stuff that.
Yeah, if you go further, it's funny.
Charles Taze Russell wrote.
Let me just share something with you about my congregation. The congregation I was in was a very kind of a unique congregation because we had a lot of former Bethelites in our hall who were elders. So when the circuit overseer would come to our congregation after the ministerial meeting was over with, ministerial servant meeting was over with, and after the elders meeting was over with, oftentimes we would sit back with the circuit overseer and just shoot the breeze. Because almost all of our circuit overseers were former Bethelites. These were guys that went to Bethel, served at Bethel, they left, got married, pioneered, then got into the traveling work. So when they would come to our congregation, they would have a congregation with all these Bethelites, former Bethelites. So we had like 4 or 5 former Bethelites at all times in our hall. So when the CO would come, we would just sit back and tell war stories. Yeah, man, you remember when Ray Fran said something? Yeah, you remember when Brother Norton said? And so you would get all of these stories, and we would just sit around and tell war stories. That's all we did. Well, as a result, we would have conversations that a circuit overseer would generally not have with a body of elders, because we were all from a Bethel, so we knew a lot of things that happened at Bethel, and we would talk about that stuff. And so it's kind of interesting because one of the things that we would talk about was the CD-ROM. I remember a conversation, and the circuit was saying, he said, yeah, and I was talking to a couple of guys in the service department. They was like, man, we really hate the society. Release that CD-ROM, because the CD-ROM had so much crazy material in it. So you can understand why they did not go further back past 1950, because it would have gotten even crazier. And it's sad because if you think about it, there was a witness, there was a Jehovah's Witness somewhere knocking on someone's door, on someone's Bible study, who would have argued that Bible study down. This is true. And then 10 years later, it's changed. Mm-hmm. And we see that process going on with the generation teaching. Everyone, including myself. In fact, that was one of my personal best and favorite talks that dealt with the generation. I used to hold up the May 15, 1984 Watchtower. And many of you remember that Watchtower had all these older Bethelites. And so I knew every one of those guys on the cover of the May 15, 1984 Watchtower, because they were all older Bethelites.
And you were so proud.
Yeah, I'm so proud, right?
We're not going to die in
We ain't going to die in this system. And man, they came out and said, we don't really know what our generation is. And then they got the generation overlapping. So we see that the society, instead of simply saying, we don't know, and let it go, they have to come up with an answer. I tell people all the time, the organization probably would have been okay if they had stuck to what they started out with when Charles Taze Russell first started out. Mm-hmm. I don't think that Charles Taze Russell, as a 20-some-year-old kid, parents giving him his inheritance before his parents even died, they gave him his inheritance. I don't think that his motive was probably a bad motive, because his religion was teaching things that he questioned, which is interesting. He questioned his own teachings of his religion. Yet you can't question your teaching of your religion. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Well, that's because he had the truth.
That's why he had the truth.
He got the truth.
He had the truth.
And we should all get back to the Kingdom Hall, y'all.
I know, right?
I'm just playing.
And so when you think about how Charles Taze Russell started out, there's a statement that Charles Taze Russell made that is no longer true. Russell made this statement: I would not refuse to call a person a brother just because you didn't believe what I wrote in my little pamphlet. That was what he said. That's what he said. I would not refuse to call you a brother just because you didn't believe something I wrote in my little pamphlet over here. And yet today, we see that has changed. And the problem occurred when the decision was made by the organization to climb into the seat of Moses. And that's where Charles Taze Russell made his mistake. I mean, that's a serious mistake. When Charlie Russell heard people who were reading his pamphlet, his little watchtower, and calling him the fulfillment of a Bible prophecy, Charles Taze Russell had a great opportunity that he missed. When the angel came to give the revelation to John, the Bible tells us that John fell down at the feet of the angels. And what did that angel do? The angel basically told John, man, get up off your knees. I'll get back in heaven. I'll be in trouble. I'll be on wing washing duty for the next 3 millenniums. Please get up off your knees, man. That was the mistake that Charles Taze Russell made. When he heard people talking about he was some fulfillment of some Bible prophecy, in the very next publication of the magazine, Charles should have told everybody, we're strapping every article that we want to write. I'm going to write an article explaining to people, I am not some fulfillment of some Bible prophecy, man. I'm just trying to do the best I can and serve God. That's all. But Charles Taze Russell did not do that. Instead, he let people go on and keep saying those things about him, putting him on this pedestal that he did not deserve to be on. And once they got this thing going, that we speak for God, they couldn't back out. Someone asked the question earlier about why the society can't acknowledge they're wrong, because they've taken on a mantle that they now can't take off. And that's the problem. And that is, we speak for God, accept what we say or die. That's basically what the Watchtower says. You can dress that monkey up any way you want to, paint that pig up. That's basically what the Watchtower says. Accept what we publish in our journals, or you will be killed by God. Yeah, that's what and after a while, people are like, what you saying ain't right. So how am I gonna be killed by God? That's what you just said won't right. So you get that dynamic going into play. So it's kind of interesting. Okay.
Right. So now this is a question that we get, not quite like the way it's being asked here, but a lot of people, they want to know how they can get their family out of this religion. Yeah. Now, one of the posters they're asking, what is the best way to help my son reprogram without scaring him off? He's 21. He's not baptized, but has been somewhat indoctrinated due to my upbringing from my mother. And this is really sad, because in the Jehovah's Witness world, we're often told, oh, they're not baptized. They're not really in the religion. They're not baptized. But here, this person's son has been deeply programmed by this religion, 21 years old. Yep. And now she's trying to figure out, she says, I'm getting through a bit now, and he's starting to see the hypocrisy in the organization, but it's slow going. What videos or information should I give him? He's been indoctrinated into believing that critical information comes from Satan, so it's not easy in dealing with our son.
That's an excellent question. There was a guy who was on the internet when I first got on. He was an elder, and he got his wife and his 2 children out. And his approach was a very interesting approach. The question asked, what video or what material can they give the person to read? Our suggestion is, don't give them anything. And here's the reason why. He's already been trained not to accept anything that's written or video that is critical of the organization. So what this gentleman did, he asked questions. He posed critical thinking questions. How would you handle this if you were approached by somebody on your job and they said, we know Jehovah's Witnesses believe this? So he got the person to think, because as a witness, and I tell people all the time, we were trained just like we were trained as kids. When the fire alarm went off in school, we knew to get up and walk out. Nobody had to tell you that by the time you reached high school. You knew bell go off, go outside. Witnesses are trained. And this is the biggest mistake that we have found and we have observed over the years that people make in trying to get their families out. They end up shutting them down, pushing 400 pages of old watchtowers in their face, showing them videos of former. Many times that will not work. And that's why it's important that you know at what point and what stage they're at. Some people, they want to know. Some people, I'm curious. I want to know. Tell me. And there are others you have to tread very lightly, because the indoctrination of a witness is thorough. I cannot stress this enough. Your typical witness has been in training for 10, 15, 20 years. to expect someone to walk up to them and say something negative about the society. As we tell people all the time, it's like that ATM machine on the third or fourth try, it's going to keep your card. And so the witness is taught to shut down. And this is why we tell people, be very careful, because once you shut them down, the opportunity to help them becomes very, very difficult. We've had so many people, and it's real sad. We've had so many people, they ask this question. We tell them, don't approach them with a whole bunch of magazines. Old 72 Watchtower don't mean nothing to a Jehovah's Witness who wants to believe that society is going to get me into the new stuff. They don't want to hear that stuff. So don't try to approach. Try critical thinking questions. And this way you get a chance to gauge their response, because they've already been trained for the quote unquote apostate stuff. And it's funny because 99% of most of the time you're using their own literature, but they call it apostate material. It's because you're telling them to look at it again. So you have to be very, very careful with that. Very, very careful.
We had some people contact us about, like, they had a situation. I'll just be real brief with it. But like, a lot of people don't realize that, like what you were saying about the indoctrination. I know when I was coming along in this religion, they were told that in 6 months, that when a person starts studying, they should be ready for baptism.
Yes.
So that tells you something right there. That tells you that it only takes 6 months to be indoctrinated. The other thing that you have to realize about this whole situation is people have to realize that you got to get out the same way you got in.
Yeah.
And you got to take it slow.
Yeah.
You're not going to go up here and read all this information over a period of time, and then all of a sudden you're going to go to a family member in your house or a friend and now give them 1 year's worth of your material and expect them to digest all this information in one fell swoop and like, oh yeah, I got what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because you're like breaking down. It's like you're trying to, like break down a building, or, like break down what they've built up over their entire life in one day.
You're destroying their world.
Yeah. And so here you had like a whole year to get to this point.
Yeah.
That's
very important.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people who leave the organization, we forget. Oh my goodness, we just forget what it was like to be back in, how strong we would stand if someone were to say the same thing to us. And so we rush back thinking we can say the same thing to these people at this time, and it does not work. You have to evaluate where the person is. And I'll be honest with you, we've had this conversation many times. There's some people, they just need to stay in the organization because they actually need someone to tell them how to think, how to live there. They don't know. They cannot survive without someone from New York telling them what to do. And there are people just like that. You and I, we all know people, they cannot make it. And so, unfortunately, you have to be very selective as to who and what you say to people, because they have been trained. That, don't forget, the training is thorough. And we have so many people who have ran into that wall and they come back 6 months later, JT, man, I thought me and my brother was close, man. We grew up together, and I showed him something, man. He went off, and he's been in this fellowship for 12 years.
But that's because they've been taught how to respond to anyone that says something negative against the organization.
Yes.
And sometimes it's like when we woke up, we had already been talking about the crazy things happening in the organization. And in talking to a lot of people after we left, we understand the reason why it's easier for some people to get out than others because of some personal experience that they had in the organization. Now, we just met this couple that's having a child custody issue. And one of the things I told them, because the wife, so it's kind of complicated. So there's a couple, they got 2 kids, and the ex-wife is trying to get custody of the kids because she is basically a Jehovah's Witness now. But when she was married to her husband, she was not a witness. So, and they were never witnesses either. So no one in this scenario were ever Jehovah's Witnesses. But the ex-wife started having an issue in her life. The Jehovah's Witnesses came and knocked on her door. And a lot of people will tell you, I won't have nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not worrying about watching your YouTube channel. I don't care about those people. But the moment something starts happening in their life that's bad, you get all these circumstances that can come up that when a witness is at the door, you are just ripe for the picking. This woman was just that way. And so now She only gets the kids twice a month on Saturdays. And it's her goal that when she gets these kids, she feeds them as much Watchtower doctrine as she can, to the point that the 10-year-old and 13-year-old kids have now gotten to the point where they cannot, if somebody sneezes and then somebody says, bless you, they're on it. We can't do that anymore. We can't do Halloween. I mean, I got the holidays, but the sneezing and saying bless you, they're on to that already. So they're like learning a new language. They understand it's wrong. And now this couple is like, they don't know what to do. How do we handle this? Yeah. So I gave them the recommendation not to talk to the kids about the Jehovah's Witnesses, but teach your children to question things. And one of the things I told them to do was to give them the example of a restaurant. And whenever you want to go to a restaurant, all you got to do is go to Yelp or go online to get your review. So if you teach your children or anybody else that you know that whenever someone tells you something, don't take it for face value, but to question it. And then that would help them in their life down the road, that they would begin to want to question things. So these are the kind of things you have to do, because if you go and try to say, don't listen to what they're saying because they're witnesses, they're trained to shut down. And the mother of this family, the sad thing about it is the Jehovah's Witness parent is now referring to this couple who actually has custody, but they have to share custody with her twice a month. They're saying, she's telling them they're the bad people. And so the kids are like, they're all up in arms, and it's just really sad. They're being told that you're being persecuted. And so these are a non-witness couple. They never even had anything to do with Jehovah, and they're considered by this new religion as worldly, unchristian, and persecuting them. So this is what their children are being indoctrinated. So people who have never even been involved with Jehovah's Witnesses could actually find themselves in a circumstance where they're touched by this religion in one way or another. Here's another question. Someone asks, do you think Watchtower uses guilt as a weapon to keep its members under control? This is what we recommend. Go to our site, ExJW's Critical Thinker, and we have a video that we did. It's called The Fog. It deals with a subject called the fog, fear, obligation, and guilt. And you will see that those are some of the tools that the society has literally perfected. Right. Let's see, where's it? Let's see. Go ahead. Next question. I'm trying to go because I copied and pasted a lot of stuff over here. Let me see what's over here. We have two screens, right? Let's see what we have over here. Okay, so it says, any advice for not allowing guilt over leaving family to take over your life? I'm thinking of pursuing further education and moving out, and my family is overly concerned with if I'm going to keep up with spiritual things and keep Jehovah first. I've been trying to convince them that I will in order to maintain peace at home, but the guilt is killing me. So they're trying to figure that out. Yeah. The guilt going to school. Yeah, guilt is a standard operating procedure of the organization. You will never, I guess the short answer to your question is you will never convince them that won't be the case. It's a losing battle. And that's probably the most important thing to understand. You will not win if you are arguing with one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You just won't. Witnesses don't have conversations. They state positions. So when you're talking to a witness, I tell people all the time, especially non-witnesses in the neighborhood, when a witness knocks on your door, you're not having a conversation because there's nothing that you can tell that witness that he will walk away and say, that's a good point. I didn't realize my religion was wrong. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So it's a losing battle. Right. What do you think about all those theories about the connections between Freemasonry and the Jehovah's Witnesses, not in the past, but actually with anointed ones or even elders? Freemasonry. Well, there are two types of Freemasons. There's interesting. As African American, there is one that typically African American people belong to, Prince Hall.
And a lot of people have looked at the organization and said, you know, they're part of Freemason. But there's a much bigger issue, and that's really the bottom line issue. We work for a company. And so you will reach a point in your life where you will realize that this organization is not what we thought it was to start with. It has very little to do with religion. We move books for the society. That is why when the circuit overseer comes to the Kingdom Hall, there are two things the circuit overseer will examine before he meets the congregation. And those are the two most important things that he will examine. The production numbers. How much product is this congregation moving? And what are the finances? Those are the two things he will know before the Kingdom Hall even has his first meeting with the new circuit overseer. So you need to understand, you know, these guys are basically middle managers. And so it's kind of interesting, but at the end of the day, you have to really ask yourself, does this sound like something from God or not? When someone tells you that you cannot question them, and they preface it by saying, nothing I'm about to tell you or write in this book is inspired. Nothing in this pamphlet I'm writing about is infallible, but you better not question it. You need to do some serious critical thing. How do you get to tell someone that you can't question something after they just explained to you that it's not inspired, that it's not infallible? You can't have both standards. It just does not work. Okay.
Okay, so now we got to clear up a statement here because I think somebody misunderstood something. They said you mentioned that you worked in the legal department. My question is, when people call into the frontline legal you hear on YouTube, are these people lawyers or have they had training?
Okay.
So address the part about the legal.
No, I didn't work in the legal department. When I left Bethel and came out on the outside, people I know a number of the guys in legal. In fact, two of the guys I used to work with in legal, the society sent them guys to school. While all the Bethelites went to the press room, these guys they went to college. Society sent these guys to law school, and today there's a society's legal counsel. What I meant was I was involved because they will often ask you to do things outside. I was asked to be involved in a project that the society was getting local elders all around the country involved in a legal project that involved witnesses in the country of Eritrea, which is just a small country over in Africa. It was an issue that was going through the State Department. We live here in Washington, D.C. Also, one of the lawyers was a very good friend of mine. He called me up. He said, JT, I'm coming down to D.C. this week. Got to drop something off at the State Department for the society, dealing with some stuff over in Russia. So you get a chance to see that. We had a corporation, a small company we ran a few years back. It was an IT company. And the society was looking for brothers with businesses to write letters. They didn't extend this to everybody. It was just extended to brothers with businesses. And they want us to write these various people, these various governors and these various rulers of these countries. So that was the aspect I was saying. So the point I was making was my experience in dealing with the organization, it spans a lot of different levels. And so you get a chance to see things, hear things, read things that the average witness simply will not see or hear about. For example, I worked at the district convention or the regional convention in what's called the chairman's office. Well, I had an assignment I had never heard of. I've been a witness, since I was 5 years old. I had never heard of the reader. Most people had never heard of the reader. Well, that's the brother who works in the chairman's office, who has the manuscript or the outline, and he literally follows every word the guy on the field is saying. And then you will mark up if he left any words out, if he added stuff in. And when he finishes giving his talk on the field, he will come up into the chairman's office and someone will be assigned to go over his talk. But you were the reader who followed word for word to make sure he didn't add nothing and take nothing away, especially if he's doing a manuscript. Well, the average witness has no idea that somebody is actually monitoring what those brothers down the field say. The reason why is very simple. At the end of the day, the society don't even trust these guys. So you get a chance to see things that the average person just would never be exposed to. Okay, next question.
Me and my wife feel we are stuck because the kids have friends at the Kingdom Hall. Please help us.
Yeah, that's a big thing. The society set up a wonderful system. When a person starts studying, the first thing they tell you to do basically is get rid of all your friends. You cut your ties with your worldly friends, your worldly relatives. So you cut all these ties with these people and we will be your friend. But it's conditional. So when you leave the organization, you literally lose your entire social structure. My mom always told us when we were leaving, she says, you need to rebuild a new clientele of friends. And that's one of the things we tell people when they're about to leave. Don't just jump up and leave, because most people who jump up and leave, they are not prepared for the backlash that they get. So one of the things that people have to do is consider rebuilding friendships with people that you cut ties with years ago. The first place to start is your relatives. If you have non-Jehovah's Witness family, let them know. Talk to them. Let them know, man, I've always loved, being involved in this religion, but there's some things that have always bothered me, but I couldn't talk to them. Let them know. And that's what we did. When we left, we were very concerned. How would our non-Jehovah's Witness family respond if we told them we had left? It was funny.
It depends on how old your children are, because your younger children, you would just, you could take them away, but if they're like teenagers and
it's very difficult
stuff like that, it is a little bit different. So there's not like a one size fits all for anyone, but what we can say is that each one is going to have to work something out on their own. But like you said, depending on where you live at, depending on how many people you're around. I know where I'm originally from is a rural area. Not too far from Detroit. But so there's not a lot of people there. There was not a lot of people to hang out with at the hall. So, everybody's dealing with something different. And where you're from, it's the same way.
Yeah, a little small place in North Carolina. And so that poses an additional challenge. We find that witnesses many times who live in metropolitan areas, they have a few more alternatives, outlets. And so it's really a challenge for witnesses who live in rural places or they live in countries, because we talk to people all over the world who live in countries where they may be the only person who they can associate with all witnesses because of where they live. So each person has their own challenge. But the most important thing is to approach it carefully. Approach it carefully.
But depending on where you live, if there are activities that your children can get involved in, you can encourage those things like ballet or music or something that's going to take them away from the witnesses. I mean, my dentist was just telling me about her son, and he's now taking voiceover lessons. And so she was telling me different stuff like that. So there's a lot of things you can get your family into when you're trying to get out of Watchtower, but you're trying to really take that association from what you have in the organization and replace it with some good, wholesome association. That's what I would recommend. Then we got, what do you think about religion now that you are out of Watchtower?
Well, I think that religion is very interesting. One of the things that the early days, they said that religion is a snare and a racket. And unfortunately, sad to say, that was how witnesses, we took advantage of other people. Many religions over the years have really failed their people. One of the things that impressed my mom before she became a witness was the fact that witnesses could find stuff in the Bible real quick. Her church, nobody even took a Bible. Only the pastor had the Bible. When people leave the organization, people take different routes. I tell people, for us and for many people, what we have observed, we were literally part of a religion that spiritually abused us. And so I always tell people, it's a question you need to ask yourself. If you had a friend who was in a very abusive relationship and you've been trying to get them to get out of this abusive relationship for years, and then they finally call you up and they say, today I did it. I packed my bags and I left. I'm not going to get beaten up anymore like that again. The question I always pose to people is, would you then tell that person, I got this person I want you to meet. I think they're perfect for you. No, you wouldn't do that at all. And the reason why you wouldn't do that is because you realize they need time to heal before they start getting into another relationship with someone else. When you consider just how deep the relationship that we had with the organization, our relationship with this organization was so deep, we would turn our backs on our family, our mothers, our fathers, our brothers. And so that's just how deep the relationship was. And so people, when we have found, when people leave the organization, the first thing you need to do is you need to heal yourself. You need to work on self, getting self together first. And then with any other relationship, some people, they decide they want to get married again, and they get married again. And then there are those who decide, I want to be single. I'm good. And that's what we have observed with witnesses who leave. Many witnesses, we've had the opportunity, and we often laugh at this all the time, we've had the opportunity to go to many churches and get invited, and we've had a chance to speak to people. But you begin to see so many similarities. And for so many witnesses, they're like, this is the same thing I had before. So it just depends on what your needs are.
I'm gonna tell you,
it depends what your needs are.
For me personally, when we had left and then we went to these different churches, I was having the same feeling that I had
back at the Kingdom Hall.
I was going to the Kingdom Hall, and we were driving up to the Kingdom Hall when we first got married. We went to our second meeting, and I said, I don't want to go here. Yeah. That's what happened to me at this one church we went to. And I was like, I'm not going back. So I'm just saying, I'm not really comfortable with it. You know, I do read my Bible and I do pray, but I don't really want to belong to an organized religion.
Yeah, organized. Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish the difference between spirituality and being part of a religious denomination.
Right.
Because that's really what the difference is. And I think sometimes people confuse them. And for a Jehovah's Witness, he knows what it means to be part of a denomination. He got it down to a science. And so for many witnesses who leave, they're just not attracted to going back out and rejoining another denomination again. And that's why I say it's very important to understand the difference between spirituality and religious denominations.
Well, the reason why I feel like I do is because I realize that it's like, you know, when people are like in our neighborhood, we got a lot of people that are religious, and then, or in just in the area that we live in. And we see a lot of the things that the Watchtower talked about that religions do. And we know that Watchtower is no different, you know, now that we're out. But I really feel like we, after leaving, even though we're not going to a church or anything right now, is that we live our lives better than even some witnesses. And we know family members that are really living some very bad, debauched lives and double lives, and they're cursing. I mean, this one cousin of ours is cursing like a dirty sailor, and yet looking at us like we're the worst thing that ever walked the planet because we left the Kingdom Hall. So to me, it's not, I don't need a label to define who I am. You know, I don't need somebody to say, oh, you go to this church over here, so you got to be spiritual, you got to be a good person. That's not how I look at things now. Critically, I can look at it the way it is. I can look at it for what it is. And I don't have to go along just because someone said, if you don't go along, you're going to be destroyed at Armageddon. I don't live like that anymore.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. And you will find, and this is what we have found and we've observed, is that people have different needs, and you have to determine what your needs are. Okay.
Let's see if this has already been covered. The 1914 generation change in that now infamous Watchtower study article of November 1995 was my first real doubt in the Watchtower Society. How did this change affect you guys? I think we answered that question in the sense that JT used to give that talk about the generation, and that's what woke us up. And he told me, if the end doesn't come by the year 2000, he said, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And it was 1998. I think you said that in 1997. Yeah. And we were gone before the year 2000. We left in 1998.
Yeah. At that point, I realized it wasn't the truth. I realized the guys in the writing department, they had no idea what they were talking about.
Right.
That was all.
Anyway, we're way past an hour.
Thank everyone for tuning in.
And we're so grateful to be here to share our experiences, to try to help everyone to bridge the gap between knowledge and information and how they can help their families. And as JT had mentioned before, we are working on additional videos. Our personal lives are really busy. One thing I would like to say to everyone is that when I was 22 years old, I thought that I was invincible. I thought I would not face any problems. I did not plan for my future. I thought that the world was going to end. I made no plans to do anything. And now I'm sitting here as a caretaker of two elderly parents. And they did not really, my dad, thank God, is a veteran. He served his country. Thank God in 1975, my father did not leave the Air Force. He stayed in. He retired as a vet. So he's a vet. Well, he's a retired veteran. And even with all of the benefits that he could get as a veteran, he still doesn't have everything he needs in his older life. So I recommend that you all, do what you can to prepare for your future, because we don't know what's going to happen in this world, but the way it looks, all of us are going to check out at some time. So I just recommend get your education. For the young lady that asked about going to school, you know, trying to go to school, make a decision to get your education and to be in good with your family, that ain't no option. You need your education so that you can get you a decent job. You got to do you. Stop worrying about everybody else and what they think. You do what you have to do, because at the end of the day, you have to live with these decisions that you are making. So that's the advice I can give you. JT and I, we got a lot of projects we're working on right now, and we hope to share a lot more information with everyone to help you continue to bridge the gap in your life after leaving this religion. So anyway, this has been Lady Cee.
This is JT. Keep in mind, I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I cannot question.
And thank you for tuning in.
Take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Bye-bye. That's a wrap.